Yeah, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to 2Forks and our second episode. I'm your host, eXtine, joined by Lucrative. How you doing, my man?
What's up? It's me again.
Yeah. And we're calling this episode Whistle While You Work. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But we like to, phrase things in kind of three segments here: appetizers, the main event, and the dessert. For our dessert tonight, we're going to be talking about league happenings and kind of going over just kind of results, getting you guys up to date, gossip, what there is, all that sort of good stuff. For our main event, we'll be talking about kind of the concept of fun in TF2 and also just kind of the spirit of competition. Very deep topic, so just stay tuned for more on that. For our appetizer, we're just going to go over some of our cooking projects that we've been working on. And what'd you make today for food, Lucrative?
Yeah, so I was, as you know, I like to cook a lot of different things. Today I went Moroccan, and I made a tagine. And if people don't know what a tagine is, it's a really, really old, cheap tomato and paprika dish. Usually with lamb yogurt and lentils, but I didn't have lamb, or lentils. So I did it with rice and vegetables.
Okay. So do you cook up a bunch of onions and other veggies up and then add the tomatoes to it, or what kind of tomatoes are you using?
Yeah. So I took regular plum tomatoes and just ground them myself, and then you reduce them right down.
Yeah.
And then you kind of reduce it with your paprika, and that's how you make your homemade tomato paste essentially.
Okay.
Just reduce it as fast as possible, and then I just saute everything up. It's really easy. You saute everything up. You do some infused oils and butter and stuff like that, and add in some rice or lentils and fry them up with your veggies. And then you add red wine vinegar and your tagine paste, and then whatever essentially you want in it. Usually people at that point put lamb in, and you boil the lamb in milk and yogurt. But I didn't have that, so I just went straight up with yogurt and cream cheese. So it was less brothy, you know what I mean? Because I didn't have
that
lamb.
sounds good.
So I just soak it all up. And it's this really awesome, it's obviously Moroccan food and Indian food are pretty close. But if you like Indian food, you like tagine.
I had actually have this box of spices right next to me that are all these spices from my kitchen of my apartment, and I was looking at something, and it's a Tunisian harissa that I used the other day.
Well,
yeah. So it's kind of similar to that, but it's really good. I wasn't sure if it was tagine. Anyways, that sounds super tasty, my man. I made some tomato sauce yesterday. I didn't get all my projects done yesterday, and today I'm making some lasagna. So homemade noodles. I got some ricotta. I'm gonna have to make a bechamel, and then I'm just gonna roast some zucchinis and just kind of take the edge off them a little bit. So kind of just like a simple zucchini homemade noodle lasagna. I'm gonna make a couple tubs and then throw them in the freezer and do it for
tubs.
A couple metal trays, and then throwing it in the freezer and doing that as a favor for my aunt. So that should be a lot of fun. Should be super tasty, and I'm sure I'll get some scraps left over for myself.
That's a lot of food.
Yeah. I love making homemade noodles. Do you do that much, Luke?
Homemade pasta?
Yeah, pasta.
All the time.
Yeah.
Pasta.
Well, do you have the kitchen attachment, or what do you use?
I usually do it by hand when I do it at home.
Okay.
Straight from hand, because I like to make raviolis at home. But
do you roll it out, or do you have a?
Yeah, I roll it out myself with a pin and on my counter and stuff. I just do it myself because I don't know. Usually, when you make it at home, you don't need a bulk amount or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I make homemade pasta all the time. I've specialized in Italian the last 4 years, right? So
yeah.
I'm pretty good at it at this point.
Yeah.
I made some really tedious fucking pastas at work.
Yeah.
You ever heard of Laura Gitas?
The name sounds familiar.
They're you take two almost linguine noodles or one linguine noodle, and you wrap it around your finger, and then you pull them and braid them. So it's a braided loop. And I had to do that at work, and I had to make 5 pounds of Laura Gitas in 8-ounce portions.
Yeah.
It was the most time-consuming thing in my life, but I do like it. I do like making homemade pasta.
Yeah, me too. One time I made 200 tortellini, or 100. I guess more 100 tortellini at home. It was my first time doing it by myself, and I did all these special things and all this stuff. and I left them out like an idiot instead of putting them in the freezer like I should.
Oh
And then
no.
well, the funny thing is though, I woke up in the morning and they were gone, and I lived with this, you know, kind of chef mentor of mine, and I was like, oh, thanks for putting my tortellini away, and he was like, what? And then I just look over, and his dog is just like sideways on the floor, just like, bah.
Oh
Like,
my god.
yeah, I ate like 100 tortellini that I was just like folding
Tortellini,
and folding
tortellini is
and
crazy.
folding.
Yeah, tortellini is crazy. When you get a rhythm for it, like you can rip through them, but they're so annoying to learn.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those party ones, you know, like it was cool at one of the restaurants that I worked at, because it's like, you know, homeboy would pipe it all out, and then you could just step over there and help him bust out tortellini, and then.
Oh yeah, I was part of that team when I was working at the last Italian place I worked at. For New Year's, we did tortellini and broth, so we had to make like literally had to make like 1,000 tortellinis or more.
Yeah, I did a tortellini with like, you know, Swiss chard, ricotta filling for the Team Liquid guys up in Vancouver for TIA, because I had a bunch of time on my hands, you know, with a nice bolo sauce, a little bolognese.
Yeah.
Well,
sounds delicious.
Yeah, I mean, that was a nice little appetizer, right? You know, that was kind of filling, you know, a little food conversation.
I'm hungry, man. I just ate, but I'm hungry.
So let's get into the meat of this conversation. And, you know, last week we definitely talked about, you know, like kind of the ESCA invite captains meeting, kind of some of the goals that going on there, kind of some generic community kind of topic stuff. You know, we also talked about kind of how that meeting was like items, format, and maps, right? And I think today there was kind of some news after our podcast, and I think today both of us kind of had reaction to that news, and we want to dive into that topic, which correlates with our previous topic, and that is about the news was about the item global whitelist, and really our take on it also really kind of comes into that concept of fun, right?
Yep.
So I guess to lead things off here, you know, I do want to kind of like, you know, obviously this is a two-person broadcast. You know, we do plan to have guests here in the future, make it more of a three-person experience. But, you know, I'm taking a vacation next week. Once I come back, we're definitely going to be getting, you know, a little bit more serious and stringent about plans for this podcast, making other improvements, listening to your guys' feedback. So anyways, to the point, right now, we really just have the statements from Aoshi to teamfortress.tv that we're going to work from as this gentleman's perspective, this person's perspective. I guess, you know, really just to sum it up now, and then we can get into the details of it. Scorch shot, detonator banned. You know, future, they said, you know, they're looking to smooth out the process, that they can update more frequently, which that is a good. But then it says, you know, take the form of cutting down on weapons that become, you know, quote unquote, obviously unsuitable for 6v6. And then also allowing weapons to be used only after thorough testing and discussion. And again, I think, you know, some of the major things there, it's like this mindset of allowing weapons to be used only after thorough testing and discussion versus letting, you know, things be open and letting that be something that kind of is the decider, right?
Is usually not thorough.
Yeah.
At all.
I mean, it is difficult to get it out, and I think this is this sort of like, oh, well, we should let things in bit by bit, but nobody ever really wants to test, and I think it is just leads to this mentality of more like gatekeeping, right? Of trying to set up these walls of not allowing items in. Let's move forward with this post a bit and just kind of get to some of the other things he said, and then I think we can kind of just dive into overall a little bit more of, you know, our thoughts on it and just kind of what their perspective is and what, I don't know, people might be able to expect moving forward. And this whitelist is basically the people on the panel. Maybe you could fill this in more if I'm incorrect on anything. It's the leader of different leagues except for ESEA. I believe not RGL.
I don't think so. Like I tried asking about it in the thread and got a pretty vague answer.
And then I wonder if TF2CL is on which, you know, the gentleman in charge of that is still working hard on it. But I've had some kind of sort of up in the air conversations with him in the past. We were talking about the whitelist, and he sort of agreed with me on some of these aspects of this whitelist of like, you know, the whitelist shouldn't be like a kind of a totalitarian, a few players deciding it. It should be more open-ended and more geared towards Valve. And he was like agreeing with me. And then he was like, you know, basically agreeing with the sentiments that I was expressing about what I thought the global whitelist should be like. And then he was like, yes, and that's why TF2CL is going to have its own whitelist. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like you have to sort of, you know, so I don't know. I think I can't, I don't know which category he's in. And again, I'm trying to look, just scrolling through this slowly as we're discussing. And again, I guess just trying to get to, I guess maybe it's on the second page after you respond.
I just tried asking him who actually makes all the decisions, and I got told league admins, but like I kind of wanted names.
Yeah.
He didn't really decide. What was that? Sorry.
Yeah, have been shifting. He basically says, yeah, people have been shifting about and still do from time to time, but he doesn't say anything about who actually was. So if it's ETF2L, UGC, and Oz Fortress, so that's like 3 organizations trying to dictate. UGC basically has lost all relevance in terms of leading the game forward. I mean, that's another conversation, but like that's just my blunt stance, and we can move on without having to get into details about it. I mean, it's a very unfortunate truth. Like they do great things, but they just are not relevant for moving the game forward. So
no, it's just a fun league, but the thing they are doing at least is different format. So
yeah, and the Force is great, and what I mean is that they offer an amateur experience. And they offer this service, but in terms of themselves growing,
it's not a
all these
top-down
things,
league.
yeah,
It's not a top-down league. Yeah.
So anyways, let's move on. We can talk about UGC another day. Ayoshi's response, you know, to you. Besides that, let's go into some of this, you know, stuff that it's also just, you know, some of it's sort of unfortunate because people were involved in this process, and it's like sort of felt like this process has, you know, twisted in different ways. You know, ESEA left for their own reasons from this process, you know, and so I think first off pointing out, you know, that like, you know, he says the base idea was done of non-bugged, non-overpowered. He says the base idea would be that Valve would be able to get more data, balance the weapons off of that data, and get closer to in-game matchmaking, which is a pretty accurate summary. And it says the second part of having a global whitelist being nice is that international lands would be less awkward. That's fairly irrelevant in this conversation.
Super irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the game overall needs to come to some answers in terms of formats. And in the past, with ESEA and everything, there was that one issue with HRG with where, you know, the quick fix, and they had to use the quick fix on ESEA, and then they went to I series right afterwards, and they couldn't use the quick fix. So that's kind of again a whole nother issue. And then he throws out this sentence: the base premise for the non-bugged, non-overpowered weapons whitelist has always been broken, as the crossbow is arguably one of the most OP weapons in the game. I'm just putting a weird accent on that for whatever reason. That's not like Belgium or anything. I'm sorry. But that sentence in itself, like, that strikes me as like very ridiculous and not understanding of what the conversation is about, right?
Yeah, I 100% agree.
So, because again, like, what is determined as like it's broken and it's not even non-overpowered, you know, and it's even this whole aspect of, again, like getting to a space where we can go to Valve and show them data, you know, because right now in the circumstances is we can go to Valve and we can say, like, look, every single invite medic, intermediate medic, open medic is running crossbow.
Every single one in the entirety of the game playing competitively. Yeah. You
know, and in that sense, it doesn't mean it's overpowered. It means it's overused from like Valve's perspective, right? Like there could be nothing wrong with the crossbow, but in that sense of their balance, that it's just overused. And so then that allows them to buff other items, right?
Yeah, the main problem with that statement that he makes about the crossbow is like the crossbow mechanic and how it works itself isn't necessarily overpowered. It's just the alternates suck.
Right.
Like, in terms of like overall use to the entirety of the game, not even like competitive. Like, it's just like there's not really a better alternative.
Yeah.
It's not that it's broken. It's just there's not a better alternative.
Yeah. And something to be a little bit more generic, but something like the sticky launcher demo man as well, you know, where you know, it's if you want to like I don't know, you know, again, if you want to class things as just overpowered, then it gets into a seriously very, very loose discussion that is just all over the place. And again, I feel like a whitelist policy for any league should be driven by, you know, things that are broken, right? And that should really be the only thing, is bugged or broken, and as well as new, right? Which that's a different category. But if it's new, brand new, then you should keep it out. If it's a game,
like if it's a thing that's added in the middle of a season, then it shouldn't be allowed in the league.
And I think there is a slight argument to be made, and I, you know, do somewhat agree with it. You know, if an item is drastically changed, you know, to then ban it mid-season so that teams can get used to it. And that's sort of similar to a new item. I feel like those changes should be, you know, relatively drastic to still allow Valve freedom, because otherwise what's, you know, the other possibility is that you play off of a prior patch, you know, correct, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that if you could do that, if that was something that was allowed, you know, then I think in the cases of TF2 or servers, I mean, it does create a lot of problems, though, in terms of people getting practices, you know, correctly, right? You'd have to make sure that servers are rolled back. It creates a lot of headaches.
Yeah, it does.
So then, again, this guy's conversation, you know, always been bans marked as overpowered while their only strength was stalemating Natasha/Rescue Ranger. I personally feel that we should aim for a more balanced whitelist that primarily focuses on being competitive and secondly fun.
That's what I hate the most.
Yeah.
That's the thing that gets me going the most, right there.
Yeah. What is kind of most upsetting to you about that?
And I've been talking with some people about this earlier in the week and stuff, but I have always loathed the idea of balancing or creating a whitelist around the concept of fun.
Yeah.
Because what people think are fun in a competitive game is completely subjective. And when people, or even a majority of people, say one thing is unfun, you're then telling the minority of the people who do think it's fun that they can't play it even though they think it's fun. And that's just really dumb, in my opinion. You should never be saying, like, this is unfun to play against, so it's bad. It's like it's ridiculous that's even like a factor in terms of making these whitelists. Because what's one of the examples he uses, right? Rescue Ranger or Natasha.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like, pushing into a Natasha for some people, yeah, you might find that unfun, but that person who is now holding you on that Uber push who's using Natasha might think that that's really fucking fun. And that's the problem with that, is like, it's like you're basically telling like one side that they're wrong, and that what they think is fun shouldn't be varied or not varied, but taken into consideration when balancing around fun, which is an absolutely ridiculous concept and completely subjective. And the other part of it is that people like who I've talked to, when I say this, they go like, yeah, the other side of subjective as well. And I'm like, yes, that's the whole point of the term subjective, is that both sides can have their own views and both be correct.
Right, yeah.
Or incorrect, for that matter.
Yeah.
And that's literally what the word subjective means, and that's literally what this situation is. And people turn around and say, you know, when I say things like, you don't know how the game will change, and you don't know what end up could being fun that appears unfun now, like, you know, develop and see how it goes or whatever. And they're like, well, you don't know that either. Once again, that's why it's the term subjective.
Right.
Just that, yes, I'm not claiming to know, but I'm saying that if you get rid of things because they are unfun, and disallow the strategies to develop around those things, or those things to even be used, then you don't know either.
Yeah. And it's silly because it's like they already exist in a world where people already have different ideas of fun. Some people enjoy playing scout, some people enjoy playing demo, some people enjoy playing medic, you know? It's like we already have that to some sense. What happens
if I turn around and I say, like, what happens if I turn around and I say, oh, I think Ubers are really unfun?
Yeah.
Which I actually do think. Like,
yeah.
I think the Uber being in the game is kind of unfun to me, but like, does anyone care that I say it? No, because I'm a minority, and that's a subjective opinion.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell someone else who goes, oh, well, I think the Uber actually is fun, and I like playing medic because of Uber.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go like, oh, okay, well, yeah. I'm not going to sit there and be like, well, fuck you, I run crits 100% of the time, and it's way better, and it's way more fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's exactly what they're doing when they use that concept to make whitelists. Like,
yeah. And it's the sort of thing as well. It's like we need to actually test strategies. And a lot of these, you know, strategies that are unfun are actually also unsuccessful, you know. So that's what sort of is kind of weird, because it's like, well, if you actually are in an open system, you know, once you get to an ESEA match and you roll up to your ESEA match, and if the other team's like, we're going to run 2 pyros, haha, then you're like, cool, well, we'll just like drop a soldier, run a heavy, and run 2 scouts, and this game will be over in 12 minutes. You know, I mean, if you're better than them, right? Like, I mean, if you're really better than the other guys and they're trying to do something cheesy to you like that, it's just like, it's a no-brainer, you know, you just counter that strategy and beat them and just move on.
Yeah,
you know.
And I would love to build off of that point you're making, if you don't mind.
Of course.
This is like such and I kind of talked about this a bit in the VOD you looked at, where I'm talking about the elitist attitude of 6 versus 6 players, which is that what you just said could be a situation that happens per se in pugs or scrims all the time, and people might actually even, and I've run into this situation myself. My team actually used to run a strategy of running pyro to middle on granary in a very serious fashion, and we literally had to warn teams before that we played them that we were going to be doing some things that appear to be trolly and actually weren't. Because people assume that when you're doing those things, or you're running a 24/7 sniper, or you're trying to run a heavy into last, or you're trying to run a heavy pushing middle or something, they always think you're trolling or something like that. And it goes back to the pug elitist mentality, which is that if you are a player that is really good at one of those classes and you have a strategy you want to try or practice something in a pug, you are absolutely crucified for trying it. Because everyone automatically assumes that you're being a troll. And the funny thing about it is that you could be winning doing those things. Like, you could be winning playing 24/7 pyro, and the other team will tell you that that's against the rules and that you're trolling, even though your team is winning the game while you're on that off class, which is absolutely the most ridiculous concept. Like, this happens also even in my local pug group. It's called Quindali Pugs. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's kind of a member favorite thing there to run the Market Gardener, right?
Right. Yeah.
Personally, I find that a really unfun mechanic.
Yeah.
No, I find the Market Gardener an absolutely ridiculous, unfun mechanic, but these guys seem to think it's fun. Why would I tell them otherwise they shouldn't use it? But my problem is when I run pyro to counter it, I'm the one that's getting shit on for it.
Because you are ruining their fun, right? Yeah.
Because it's against the rules and I'm ruining their fun and I'm trolling. When realistically, I'm literally running the exact counter to that play style.
Yeah.
And I've even done that in pugs with people freaking out, and then we turn back and like we're winning the game.
Yeah.
Because they can't fucking Market Gardener or medic every 2 seconds, and they're like, oh, we'll just run away. And it's like, you're basically limiting the counters while telling me that I can't use the counter.
Yeah.
Which is like, that is literally the elitist mentality through and through.
Yeah. Like, I think, again, to bring us back to the core message, and then we can continue ranting, whistle while you work. And this is competitive TF2, you know, like, on one hand, of course, like, we want it to be fun. We want people to play competitive TF2. We want people to get a rewarding experience out of it. But also, competitive TF2 really is about, you know, like, let's break down the 2 words there. TF2, competitive. You know, like, this is supposed to be the best people at playing TF2. So there's reasons for whatever formats the leagues have right now. There's reasons for whatever. But at the end of the day, these are the people that are supposed to be the best, right?
Yeah.
And they need to be playing on real whitelists. They need to be playing in a live system when it's closed and it's locked down, and when it's not a true competition to really find out what the best strats are. Then it comes off as this fake, closed gatekeeping scenario where you have these players that are really good, but what they are representing and what they're doing is not competitive TF2 anymore. And really, when you boil that down of competitive TF2 and what our goals are here of to find the best player of TF2, what we are asking of them is not really fun, right? It's not really supposed to be fun. The experience at the end of the day, when Banny gets done barely winning another season of ESEA, or maybe not barely winning, ESEA, he's going to be like, yeah, that was fun. But the reasons that it was fun, or more fun for him than the last season, are going to be because he's a challenge. He's challenged competitively. When I had fun playing with the Burnsiders, a lot of times I'm upset at the end of practice. I'm upset. Yeah. And then I get done with practice, I walk away from the computer, and I'm like, wow, that was a lot of fun, and it's just like, when you're in the midst of playing, when you're trying to win, like that should be a hard time, and there should be these things that kind of make you grit your teeth and that you kind of don't like, but you have to put up with, or you have to challenge, or you have to punch in the face so that you can come out the other side the winner, right? So, that's really how I feel about it. And I feel like, in a lot of ways that we've, gotten away from that, right? And it comes down to both kind of the class limits and, the way that Sixes is, the way that the Sixes community has presented themselves to Highlander, to Prolander, to other groups in the past. That does come off as this elitism.
Yep. It's 100% what it is.
And
it doesn't come off that way. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, and it's very disappointing to hear Aoshi, who's supposedly the leader of this global whitelist that supposedly should have been really a group fighting for the good of the competitive community and fighting for better unity with TF2 just overall as a premise. This is supposed to be a whitelist that everybody can draw from, to look from, to like build forward. But for him to say stuff like it's been 10 months since any changes to any weapons, and then to imply that that's like too long of a time to wait, like this is a 11-year-old game,
Yeah.
like
the game itself, like through competitive play, is always changing.
Well, when
it's like you can't say that nothing has changed in 10 months in competitive TF2. Like that's not true.
Yeah, I don't think it's
just not.
Yeah, and I don't think it's fair to Valve, and I also don't think it's fair because it's essentially there's been foot dragging that have made that process harder for Valve to actually get the data and to make changes. So if you're dragging your feet and at the same time you're complaining that it's taking Valve so long, to actually make changes, it's like we're still not really involved in the process.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like that is such a ridiculous claim for anyone in competitive TF2 to make when 90% of those people are so unwilling to play in a format or in a way that Valve wants. And and then they'll sit there and turn around and be like, "Oh, well, Valve's doing nothing." And it's like, what do you expect? Yeah,
exactly. Like you guys have basically continued to just piss on the competitive matchmaking format, right? That 6v6 in-game competitive matchmaking format people just continue to shit on, and it's disappointing to see that not be populated. I mean, obviously there's issues with it and we need changes, but I think that there is just this major overall philosophy of trying to phrase things like it's fun, but it still just kind of ties into maintaining strategies, maintaining hierarchies. And
I kind of want to build on what you're saying too with another statement on this post that I was just reading. Because you were building off the fact that he said that it's been 10 months since any changes to the weapons, and I want to talk about the continuation of the statement because it's actually is almost like borderline infuriating. And let's say here, he says the in-game matchmaking has had barely any improvement after release, and it's disliked by everyone, which we kind of already touched on, which is basically like you didn't even give it a chance. So how are they going to make it improve when no one that's actually like trying to play competitively at a high level is bothering with the matchmaking system? Like that's a joke statement right there. This is the thing that
these
really
two
gets
sentences
me.
are pretty bad. Yeah,
this kills off any need to try and open up the whitelist to weapons that are annoying / obnoxious.
Yeah,
another completely subjective opinion, and this one's even worse. As by doing this, we're just ruining the game mode that we've built up, and in my opinion, slightly ruined by trying to cater to Valve.
Yeah.
Like this guy has played for a really long time, Aoshi.
Yeah.
In the ETF2L scene and played in Sixes and Highlander like for a long time. I even recognize his name. But this is an absolutely ridiculously ignorant and blunt statement. Like not very well thought through. And this almost is like I actually find this statement incredibly hypocritical when it comes to the fact that this is a person trying to make the game better overall.
Mm-hmm.
Like incredibly hypocritical. Like I just don't get it. I don't understand, but especially saying something like we're ruining the game mode that we've built.
Yeah,
it's like first of all, TF2 is a grassroots esports, but we haven't built shit without Valve. And like Valve has given the updates in the past to create the game how it is, and we kind of talked about this in private before, where this game fucking started competitively completely different than what it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't just magically turn from me playing 8 versus 8 every fucking day when I first started TF2 to what it is now solely off of us. That is bullshit. Mm-hmm. That is total bullshit. And like there have been plenty of updates from Valve that have changed the game. There's all of these changes that have come through competitively have not been because of us. Like we have done things on our own in terms of like lands and growth of ESEA and stuff like that. But even at the same time, to say that we've built up the game when systematically TF2 is has thoroughly destroyed the game, in my opinion, like over time, is a ridiculous thing to say and completely ignorant, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I really don't like when there's disrespect thrown to Valve. I feel like I stand up for the Valve dev team quite a bit. I got into it with a group I might as well just leave unnamed because I do love those guys. I don't want to shade them too much, but I shaded them on Twitter because they said something about, imagine where TF2 would be at if Valve supported it, And I just felt like that was super insulting,
So many people who say that, and it's like you have no fucking clue what you're even saying.
Yeah,
like, you have no idea.
Yeah, like Valve obviously cares like so much about TF2 overall. That it just is such a non-starter. So I got a couple other ways to phrase this conversation to start some other talking points about it. One is I want to actually bring up some martial arts discussion, and I want to talk about this gym that I went to, and I practiced Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for a couple years. What was his name? Man, it's on the tip of my tongue. Aristotle? Do you remember him?
Yeah, I know who he is. Yeah,
I want to say he got into Brazilian.
The TF2 player, not the.
Yeah. I want to say he got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I think it was his match. I commentated Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu match of his on my channel. People were like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't give a shit." Yeah, it's Aristotle. Yeah. I just pulled it up. Anyways, so getting to the point of this all, a big thing at the gym that I went to was this concept of aliveness, and that's also something that like stems at like Bruce Lee and Bruce Lee's talkings. And so really, what it boils down to is having a system where you're actively challenging it. And the way that this gym teaches Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and this gym is called Straight Blast Gym. Conor McGregor trains out of Straight Blast Gym in Ireland. And
is it like a style of gym, or is it actually called the Straight Blast Gym?
So I mean, curious. it's an international chain of gyms, or you have like affiliated gyms or whatever. So straight. I
thought you meant like a Straight Blast Gym was like a style of gym, like a style of like routine in a gym or something.
No.
I was just confused.
I think Straight Blast.
I follow you now.
Yeah. I think it does sort of allude to like a Jeet Kune Do, like Bruce Lee punch. But anyways, But anyways, yeah, the main thing that he's about is like aliveness, and it's this concept that, what you're doing, has an opportunity to grow. And, comparing the way that they taught things versus these kind of more, strip mall kung fu joints, or, these culty, key flow master bullshit, things, or these like acrobatic gymnasts, martial artists, where it's just like you have all these things that are flashy, or that's like, okay, well, that's good in your closed, locked off world, and that's what like sixes is, where it's just like they've defined the rules of the fight, and sixes is good under the rules of that fight.
Yeah.
But, because you've hard-coded the rules so much, you've lost a lot of the sense of aliveness. And some of these hard codes, it's the whitelist, some of it is the class limits, as Banny's been arguing about on Twitter, and some of it is the social concepts, like Hot Wax was talking about, being like pressured out of playing Pyro.
Actually just looking at that too,
Yeah. So there are these like hard-coded ways of how you're supposed to play, and so it loses a lot of this aliveness because you can't counter certain things by doing certain other things, even with what's allowed, and when people from the outside approach it and they see this and they're like, oh, well, like, how come I can't, try this? And it's just like, oh, well, because blah, blah, blah. It's all locked down to control things. And when you have an alive system, it's like, that's what really going to give us the best product at the end of the day. When people can challenge the master, when they can walk up to him and say, hey, I have this new idea that I want to try, and it goes like this, and Banny says, okay, come at me, bro. Right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like, come at me, try your shit. Not this like, oh no, man, you can't do that, that's against the rules, man. And it's just like, what? Like, I've been practicing this in the fucking schoolyard, like.
And that's actually a perfect example too, because we're going to refer to Benny again, as much as people dislike it because he's the best player out there. It's a great example because Benny is the master, and he literally would do that. He would literally say, take any class limits you want, take any weapons you want, and try to beat me. And he would. And he literally would. And he would get his team to go along with it. I guarantee it.
Yeah. I mean, he's thrown it down on the table, and it's like, that's also, again, it all goes like hand in hand, where, my gym teacher, this coach, he'd argue against these like fake kung fu schools, and it's like that stuff's also like misleading and dangerous, and it gives people this like false sense. So it's like people are walking around puffing up their chests and talking shit, and they can't even like challenge Banny on an open field. Banny's playing under the rule set, playing under these constraints, has owned them. He's encouraging them to like find this new system of aliveness, and people are still really hesitant to take him up on it.
Yeah, and it's hilarious that people in TF2, especially upper echelon players, fight the aliveness of 6 versus 6. Like, they really do, like, through and through. It's like, you guys want to keep butting your head against the wall with the exact same format and the exact same strategies and the exact same class setup, and you want to keep losing like you have been. And, I mean, that's not entirely the reason that Froyo is so dominant, but I would say that it's probably part of it. Like, I really don't think that people are trying much else to actually make them uncomfortable. Like, they've seen it all at this point, you know what I mean? Just like Robin Walker said, right? Which is, they fucking seen it all in TF2. Like, Benny has not seen a situation presented to him in all of the years he's been one invite that he has not seen before.
And if there's just this, like, underlying mentality that, like, if you're going to try and try something new and something out there, then people are just going to ban it, right? Like, that's just sort of like the feeling, and it has been proven in the past where like different strats have come out and they've gotten banned, and in the case of the Scorch shot, it's just like, nipping it in the bud, you're just like, oh, it's just annoying, like,
it's so ridiculous. You just say it's annoying.
Well, and
it's like,
they're
like
basically
if someone really likes playing Pyro and wants to use it in a certain strategy, and now they can't because you think it's annoying.
Well, and even too, what's the worst thing that happens? Okay, so, one team starts running full-time Pyro instead of a roamer, right? Okay, so then they find success with it, and then, 2 teams start doing it, 4 teams start doing it, 8 teams start doing it, and then all of a sudden everybody's doing it, and then somebody's like, oh, well, why don't we drop a scout and we run a heavy weapons guy, because that's a little fuck up the pyro, and we'll still have a pyro, and it's just like
something like anything along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like TF2 is an alive game. People do want to see this sort of like evolution in these answers and different strategies, and instead people just complain and whine and just try to get it played exactly the same way.
Well, and it's like going back to the point we said before, it is that social stigma of elitism that this allows people to do that. Like, there could be competitive players out there. Like, I've even seen like good pyros in competitive play, but they don't get to play it as much as they probably would want to because people tell them that they can't do that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if they're winning or not, which is the most ironic thing ever, is that you could be winning a pug with like full off classes and people still tell you you can't do that. You can't do that. That's against the rules. Even though they're winning the game in a competitive setting.
Yeah.
It's like,
and
it's so ironic. It's unbelievable.
And again, I think it does play in this overall sense that, we're both older gentlemen in the TF2 scene, and it's just easy, it's easier to just be like, these kids and their weak minds, I need the mentality, but it's like, I've been yeah, but it is frustrating because it's like I've been in those games where it's like we're losing the game. It's a pretty good pug. There's like 5-8 minutes left on the game. One of their guys goes pyro because one of our guys switches off because they're just trying to do something new. So their guy goes pyro, and then like our team is just complaining, and then just starts playing like even worse, and you're just like, bros, like, like we're not even like trying to win. You guys are just complaining and then just like whining and then losing focus and then losing and then complaining more and then being like, these guys are so disrespectful. And it's just like, Jesus Christ, man, like
it's like if you can't beat them on the off classes, you don't deserve to win. Like,
yeah,
if they're
like
beating you on off classes, they're beating you.
Yeah.
Like that's a simple fact. It's like who wins and who loses. It doesn't matter how you get there or what you're doing. If someone's beating you with one scout, one pyro, one soldier, and one heavy, then you're losing to that. And if you want to sit there and grind your head against the wall, like I said before, and run the same standard class setup and just tell them that they're trolls and they're idiots and they'll never be good teams doing this and stuff.
Yeah.
And you just continue to lose, like you lost. You fucking lost in a competitive game. So it doesn't matter. Like what you said doesn't matter until you can actually beat them running that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely take it as, a challenge and opportunity to better myself, to push and try to, just be a better player at the end of the day. It's a fresh challenge. TF2 is a complicated game, but, like, I want to be playing the TF2 that is TF2. I don't want to be playing something that is a split-off variant of that.
I'm going to shoot a question back at you about what you're saying, right? What is your response, or how do you feel if like a group of competitive players came to you and we're talking about like the unfun and fun mechanic and what you want to use and what you don't want to use, etc., and a bunch of TF2 players, 6v6 players come to you and go, you know what, it doesn't matter what you guys are saying because the majority thinks it's unfun and the majority thinks this, right? What do you say in response to those people, and like how do you respond to those people?
It's pretty easy. The majority of the 1%. That's who they're talking about. Like, let's be real, right? Let's be mad real. Like, how big is the competitive TF2 community? So if you're talking
in comparison to the rest, it's minuscule.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're talking about the majority of the competitive TF2 community doesn't think this is fun, that doesn't fucking matter at all, to use vulgar language in Overheel's cat's presence. Like, it just, like, it just doesn't matter, in the grand scheme of things. It's ridiculous. And, we have to appeal to the TF2 community as a whole. If we're really trying to appeal to just Sixes players, and, then that's the only community, that's completely different from the TF2 community. And this is an argument that I've gotten into before, and I think that really, I think it is sort of the best disarming argument against people like, I lost his name, but our Belgian gentleman from ETF2L, Aoshi, where, basically where the Sixes community has been going, like some factions of, you know, this sixes community, some factions of it, and where it sort of in some ways continues to go, although there have been some positive steps definitely for sure lately. But basically, you know, I can sum this up in this anecdote of this story at Rewind 1, where in the after party, I got into a very fierce debate with me, myself, and Lucrum. A lot of intoxication going on. Tino was probably pretty intoxicated. So, you know, I think that this conversation maybe meant a little bit more to Tino and myself or to Crumb and myself than it did to Tino. But also, Kevin and Pone was in there in a little bit. And basically what it boiled down to, and it's like you sort of know that you've won an argument when the other person is just kind of at the end of it is completely powerless because you are just giving them advice on their opinion and you've already listened to them and they can't change your opinion because you sort of agree with them. But you know, like, you're just like, come on, man, you know? So, like, that's sort of what it boils down to is, like, at the end of the day, it's like Tino's saying all this stuff about, like, the purity of sixes, right? Like, all these guys that make this argument. Yeah, right, you make this cringe face.
It makes it sound like a fucking cult.
It sort of is, but, you know, like...
It sort of is a cult.
Right, and that is sort of, I guess, the point, you know, where it's just, like, when they talk about these things and they're like, oh, well, like, remember the good old days where we had soldiers flying through the air and just, like, it was wonderful, you know, like, all these nostalgic pictures they paint, you know.
The thing I remember about the good old days was having 8 really good invite teams on any given season that don't exist anymore.
Yeah. So it's all silly, but it's like, you know, you guys are, like, living in this world that you guys are, like, trying to control and is completely separate from everything else. And it's also like Tino, I think at this point was just sort of like, you know, I mean, we're debating and he's just sort of like, I'm just so tired with arguing with these people that like think that Highlander is fun. And it's just like, I'm like, bro, then don't, you know, like don't.
It's also like, who are you to tell them that it isn't fun?
Well, yeah. And also, you know, it's like, it's just this whole thing where it is like stressful to try to like lead this community and put this pressure on what this community is going to be, but to try to like, some of these people that are sixes defenders, you know, where it's just like you're trying to force sixes on everybody. You're trying to say that sixes and the way that you play sixes is the only way forward. And really, that's such a anti-Valve stance and so contrary to being alive that at that point, you have to make your own pro mod. And that's basically what I've got getting to with Tino and other people. It's like I say, yo, like, you know, what you're saying about traditional sixes and about protecting these things, you have to make a pro mod at that point because Valve otherwise is just going to swoop in and it's going to be like, you know what, these guys don't listen to us. Fuck them. Let's rebalance this. And they're just going to change something just drastically. And the sixes, these sort of sixes players are going to freak out and say, this is the end. This is the end. We have to have a rollback patch on a server. And then all of a sudden they have a pro mod and they could play TF2 exactly how they want. And when I presented this case to Tino, you know, basically they're like, yeah, that might be what we want. But that would kill us because it would completely separate us from the TF2 community. And it's like, man, dude, it's like, yes, like, but it is also, you know, it is also this thing too of where it's just like, I urge those people that if that's how strongly they feel about this like sixes and this vision of sixes, then go and run for it, man. Then stop arguing with the rest of us that want to play TF2 as a fun, like just TF2 fun game. And I mean that as like pub TF2 is fun. Comp TF2 is always going to be hard work. It's always going to be a balance of, you know, fun and hard work. But you have to be with the TF2 community. You have to be with Valve. Otherwise, make a pro mod. Best of luck. Maybe eventually you can have like a independent studio. You can make an own custom mod. You can just continue to build that small community. But like that community is so different from the TF2 community as a whole. So.
Yeah. And I mean, like, it's kind of funny that does get brought up that way because, like, that's basically what TF2 is now. And that's the situation that TF2 is in now in terms of 6 versus 6. Like, it is a segregated community and it is a segregated part of the community that Valve, from what you tell me, because obviously I wasn't there, doesn't really care for. And
some balance with the phrasing of that statement.
There's a balance of the phrasing of it, but I mean, like, the point is that they're not getting back from us what they need to put more into
Yes.
it.
Yes.
It's how I should say it.
Yes.
And the funny thing about it is that people are very quick to say that and like talk about like, you know, making the purity of sixes, which is a very cringe statement.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And I can recall a time back in the day again. I'm fucking saying it again, man. I can recall a time where, you know, we did get listened to, and on the forums, there was feedback and stuff about sixes, and people would say things that they wanted, and TF2 developers would listen, and like that's the only reason we even got things like the ability to negate random spread in the game, because that came through from competitive players speaking constructively about TF2 and wanting to help the game overall. Whereas now it's more of like you said, or what Tino said rather, is like preserving what we have already, which is like, okay. I mean, like, what, I don't know, like, it just, like, it's such a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a dead end, if you want to go that route. It simply is a dead end, and when it comes to the competitive game, the number one priority should be winning. And I understand that people, even the lower levels, do just play for fun, and they like playing competitively. Competitive is fun for them, like 6 versus 6 is fun for them. But when you're balancing the game from a top down, and you're really trying to put the hours into work at a top level and stuff, the number one priority should be winning. So what you think is fun and what you think is unfun and what you think defines the purity of sixes, really, to your, like, to the people who think that, really it benefits them if they don't go that route. You know what I mean? If there's more things allowed for them to win the game rather than what they think is unfun playing against. Because, like, the thing is that if they think this is the other part of it that's really polarizing to me, is people go, you know, whatever, let's use Natasha. I don't know if this is exactly correct, but I'm going to use it as a hypothetical.
Yeah.
People say, you know, Natasha's overpowered. This is really unfun to play against. It's like, but there's nothing stopping you from using it yourself. So realistically, like, what's the problem with it? And people will come up with all sorts of solutions, like, oh, like, you know, if they're running this, like, you can't do this, like, you can't just Uber in on this, like, Natasha heavy and stuff. And it's like, so do something different. But this way is anytime it comes up where something seems overpowered or unfun, they outline it in the way that it's not balanced against what the meta is now and like what people like to do now. And it's like, the simple answer is do something different. And that is such an unbelievably hard concept for 6 versus 6 players to understand. And I was actually reading like what Hot Wax was saying in the chat a little bit. Yeah. Daph was kind of talking about it a bit. They're saying something about like trading off pyros for roamers and stuff like that. And you know, Daph actually brought up a good point. It's just like pyro isn't actually that good in 6 versus 6 because pyro versus roamer doesn't exist in a vacuum, which is exactly what you said. There's still things in the game to counter it. So if you allow, but like if you take a hypothetical situation, like, or sorry, make a hypothetical situation where we take away the social stigma, we take away the elitism, and someone can run pyro instead of a roaming soldier as freely as they please, right? Does that pyro that gets countered by the 2 scouts tell his team, let's just keep fucking doing this? Or does he switch, or does he get one of the other players on his team to switch to counter the scouts? And then we've gotten to a whole new setup that counters the original 6 versus 6 setup. And it's like that could easily happen in this game right now if all of those mentalities and all of the stigmas and the elitism and all that shit was not there. Because the only reason that people don't do that right now, because I know for a fact there's 6 versus 6 players out there who love running heavy, who love running pyro, who love running sniper, don't fucking do it because they're afraid they're going to get crucified for it. And they can't run it in pugs because it's against the rules. It's like what you said before, which is that it kills the aliveness. They've dictated the rules of the fight. And all of those things actually go against what competitive players should want, in my opinion. Like, that's where I get really confused.
And I think it, you know, is important if it's like we could get into a space where the lower level players are able to try out these strategies, because that's the thing is like the strategies that are used now are the strongest strategies. You know, they make sense. They're very straightforward. They're very effective. And when it comes to the top level guys right now, they're very good at putting those strategies into place. And I don't think that we would see very major drastic changes right out of the gates, and I think that you would have, more stuff happening with some of these weapons that at the top level just don't exist, because currently teams don't know how to use them. They don't know exactly what the strategy is. They don't actually know whether they're actually good, so they're not going to spend the time working to develop it. But somebody's going to come in and somebody's going to be like, hey, so-and-so, will you play medic for me? And they'll be like, yeah. And he's like, by the way, I run skill res demo all the time. And he's like, oh, that sounds interesting. And he's like, yeah. And then he like goes and finds like 2 pockets, like our pocket and a soldier that like want to like believe in him with the skill res demo. And then you have a team that's like a skill res demo all the time, but like, and that might be an open, and maybe they just lose all season, but like maybe that inspires somebody else. Like maybe somebody in open says, oh yeah, I see how that works, but you really need to like crits a scout to go with that, or like just wacky stuff that's being developed at the lower level because the game is alive and not locked down to being, this is how the best strategy is, this is what you should play, these are the allowable counter strategies, and everything else is banned until we deem it acceptable, right?
And it's funny that you say that, because I'd like to point out another old TF2 thing, right?
Yeah.
That builds on that, which is like, how does everybody think that we got here, like to where we are now? The exact same situation that you have just described did happen to create what is now the meta setup of TF2.
Yeah.
Which is 2 scouts, 2 soldiers, the demo man, and blah, blah, blah. And even when that was originally deemed, like, there wasn't roaming soldiers and pocket soldiers, or roaming scouts and pocket scouts. Like, that wasn't a thing when that first started. Those designations did not exist. And then you saw over time, like, things like the gunboats completely changed the game. And even when that was added, then you really defined what a roaming soldier was. That really changed how the setup was for 6 versus 6. But then it still develops, and then all of a sudden people are now running double gunboat soldiers over time, right? And then you're also seeing like a very defined role for scouts on either side, which did not exist before. Like that was not a thing until I forget like when it really came up, but like before, even when gunboats was initially added, there wasn't like flank scouts and pocket scouts. Like all of those roles have kind of come up over time and been used over time and stuff. And even back in the day when 6 versus 6 was a thing, before gunboats, like heavy was ran. Like heavy was ran as opposed to a pocket soldier, because of the heal demand and stuff like that. And the reason we're at the setup we are now is because, like I said, of the exact situation and process you just described. But now it's just become streamlined, is how I would describe it, without the positive part of it. And it's been disallowed to change further. Like we've seen glimpses of things like change. Like we saw Machina like run a bit, like sniper run a bit more because of that weapon, and then boom, it's too good, banned.
Yeah.
now it's not run nearly as much, right? Like you used to see a lot more viability with that because of the things that it could provide to the meta game, and now it's just banned because people deemed it was too good.
Yeah.
Which is also bullshit. Like.
Yeah. I think
but that's my point, right? Is like those processes all happen all the time, but now it's just not happening at all.
Yeah,
because we're just banning so much shit all the time.
Let me build into a hypothetical going off of some comments in chat, and we haven't allowed anything to change drastically, and that is definitely a possibility that you have to open yourself up to. Like people in chat saying right now, what about the quick fix, and different things about it. Maybe it's, somebody saying it's really amazing on defense. And it's just this sort of, overall, we've never been like, oh, this item that Valve has put in the game and that they have tuned, if we allow it, it's going to change everything. Right. And right then, that concept is enough to have everybody say no to it. Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
But there's that answer is just crazy. And so, okay, so let's say, then let's go through worst case scenario quick fix. But let's say, yes, we allow the quick fix. Everybody starts running quick fix. Like, okay, is that really that bad of a thing? And I think that there are then it does lead to a scenario, because then people will throw out these hypotheticals, and then again you actually do get into the issue of where we still in some ways haven't really completely decided on what the format of competitive TF2 is, and what that is still changes your perception of enjoyment of an item. So I think in the case of if it's an hour-long match or if it's first to 5 and you're like, well, we're using quick fix now and it's really strong defensively, and so now all of our games are going to an hour, and then we're getting into golden caps because we're tied on 2-2, so a match is lasting an hour and a half, and it's like, well, yeah, that sounds like a shitty fucking format, you know? But if you had,
like, that's not really like the problem.
Right? Is that a problem with the quick fix, or is that a problem with the format? And so if we were to be like, okay, yeah, we're switching the quick fix, this is allowed now, and that everybody uses the quick fix, and games are 1 to 2 after 30 minutes. It's like, if we're playing 30-minute games, is that really a problem? I mean, if that goes on for 6 months, if that goes on for a year, then yeah, maybe it is a problem that all of a sudden we're only getting 2 captures in a game. But when we've been playing these hour-long matches that are first to 5, you know, it's like every round is 20%. And so 20% of the game, if you lose that because of some random bullshit, that's really frustrating. So if Valve tunes the game down to make it more defensive and make it harder to capture points, but we're not even reacting to the weapons that they're using and they're allowing, there's just like zero actual evolution of the game is ever allowed whatsoever. Like, what we're competing in is just not being allowed.
Playing the exact same fucking maps all the time too.
Yeah.
Like, if new maps are allowed, you'll see different strategies come up and different like things working better on newer maps or older maps or whatever than the maps in the current rotation, right? Like, that can change. And I also want to build again, like, kind of reiterate what I said when you're talking about the quick fix. Like, we'll just keep building on this example, right? When people say like it's too good, and like, I'm gonna kind of ignore like the defensive part of it you were kind of talking about and kind of go to another point of it, which is like, yes, like the quick fix may be good in a very certain situation, but what people perceive it as good is against, like, it's good against what is currently the meta. If you see the quick fix like allowed in play enough, and you see it like kind of develop and stuff like that, you might see the meta shift more to people running full-time crits as opposed to running full-time Uber, and then Uber becomes the niche side of it because crits is still really good against quick fix, right? And that's what I mean, is like that kind of development can happen over time, and that can be the meta, just like how, you know, Gunbolt Pocket Soldier became part of the meta because like things were changing, and they go, you know what, this is what we have to do against how people are playing now. And then if the quick fix is allowed and people start doing that, they're like, wow, like maybe we should be running crits to middle like all the time and running it more, and then it kind of forces them to switch, and then you have to decide when you're actually gonna be running Uber crits or quick fix. And like, people act like the adaptability isn't there. It is there. It's just that people, like good players and stuff like that, don't want to adapt. They don't want to be adaptable. They don't want to be responsible for staying with the top level. They want to sit on top, and that's where they fucking want to be, and they don't want an excuse to ever go down, right? Like, so I mean, like, I think that's a bit of a ridiculous point in terms of the perspective from 6 versus 6 players. They're like, oh, like quick fix is way too good on defense. It's like, yeah, but crits is really fucking good, and that's like a thing that people use in the game all the time. So like, what's the problem? You know what I mean? Like, just because you won't get to use Uber 90% of the time in your precious 6 versus 6 format will somehow be changed doesn't mean that it's a bad thing for the game or a bad thing for your team or whatever.
I don't know. Maybe what the most simple solution to it is to have like some I don't know if I can think of a punny enough name on the fly, but just like some teams that are just going to enter paid competitions and just run strategies that are considered cheesy, but you know, match the rules and just try to make that money. Just you know, try to climb up that ladder of success as much as possible by playing wacky stuff. If people rage and don't play against you, then so be it. You know, maybe we need to set 2 teams up so that they can scrim each other and actually play wacky strats. But again, it's just this thing that, you know, it might be seen as trolling, it might get banned out, and that has been what happens in ESEA, because it is like, again, it's just this thing where it's like part of this whole issue in this case of Aoshi, it's like it's an issue regardless of who the player is that's in control of the whitelist. It's an issue regardless of who the 3 players are that are in control of the whitelist. It's an issue if any players are in control of the whitelist.
Yeah.
And what we have is that players are in control of the whitelist. And I mean, there is this sort of a step of, oh, well, no, Try's in control of the league of ESEA. It's like, yeah, but Try's listening to the captains. And so say, for example, that your team, theoretically, that your team comes up with something, that you see something in some pub video that's got 100 views of some guy being like, oh, yeah, we just like asked for a scrim and we're a bunch of pubbers and we ran this strat and pissed off a bunch of IM players. You know, you could be like, wow, that strat's really good. And then you go into invite and all of a sudden you switch to that strat, you know, a quarter of the way through your season. And then you come in like 5th place in playoffs or something, or you come in 5th place instead of dropping out. And then the next season you show up at the captain's meeting and there's fucking 5 guys there that are all pissed at your team. Right? You know? And there's like, there's 5 captains that are pissed at your team and there's 2 captains that don't care. And then all of a sudden,
then there's us sitting there who were
like, it was awesome. Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, it was so cool. And they're just going to be like, no, screw that, dude. Like, we're not going to change to adapt this next season. We're not going to take that strategy ourselves. We're going to ban it, you know? So,
yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, and like, I kind of want to segue this a little bit because this is more your field in terms of talking about it. And I kind of want you to talk about, especially with me, because I'm still like, a little ignorant towards it or whatever, and I want you to describe like maybe like why this is a huge turnoff for Valve and stuff, and like why they don't want to see this happen. You know what I mean, with 6 visits and stuff.
It's definitely that aspect of player controlled meta. Like that's really why it's such a big turnoff for him. You know, Robin Walker is a big proponent of that. It's this aspect of the players that are on top want to maintain their position on top. And this harkens back to the mixed martial arts conversation that I was talking about, because from the perspective of my coach, you know, but these other kung fu gyms, and you see it in these culty gyms, you see it basically in fraternities as well when there's hazing. And it's basically this sense that, like, you know, in these bad kung fu gyms, you know, these martial arts gyms, they're like, oh yeah, this thing is so badass, you should learn it. Like, look at me, I've learned it. Now I'm going to demonstrate on you why it's badass. And then they just like throw you to the ground while you're standing still. And they're like, if you stay here for 2 years, then you'll get to do that to the new guys, you know? And so just this sort of thing where it's just like you're beating other kids up because they have to play in a format that they're not used to, and that's your world. And that's kind of what we see again and again with these like Highlander players. And like Highlander players transition to 6s because there's more competitive players that are there. Not necessarily some of the like the format appeals, but there are better players that are there, but they have to make that adjustment. They have to switch to a newer style of format that's based around what happens in 6s and these restrictions that are put in place from the top down. So again, it's like they don't want to see the players in control of it, and they want to see feedback. Those are like the 2 like main things, is like they don't want to see players deciding themselves unless it's like broken, right? But like they don't want these like subjective like bullshit, you know, this is unfun. They want to see things develop. They view this game as fun. They view that, they know that other people have other ideas of fun. It's what you nailed. They don't want to see players telling other players not to do other things because they don't consider it fun. Yeah.
And I just want to kind of like just confirm kind of what you're saying too, which is like if these things were allowed and like 6 versus 6 was more open to like what we were playing with and yada yada, you would probably see more involvement from Valve in terms of balancing the game or creating updates, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's like 100%. And it's just, some of these conversations are on one hand sort of frustrating because it's like conversations like, I mean, it all makes sense, but it's like sort of frustrating because it's just like, guys, I came back from Valve in like 2012 and I made this post on TFTV. Didn't you guys all read it? You know, like, and follow it? You know, like, come on, you know, but so some of this stuff is really old, but like, it is just, it's still just so true that like, they don't want to see, you know, players just blindly banning stuff because they don't understand it. They want to see it be this open system where they can get feedback, where they can understand why things aren't being used. They want the the competitive community to put their hands on things, and to not be involved too worried about things that are like considered bad, right?
Yeah.
So,
And just another kind of question, right? Is there like a plan to like for you or even like Banny or something like that you know to like maybe like reconvene with them more recently or anything like that, or see where they're at in terms of what they're thinking now, or is all this even like relevant? You know what I mean, in terms of like getting Valve's focus or their attention, I guess you should say.
I think there is an art to writing emails to Valve and getting responses to emails from Valve.
Yeah.
I think probably overall across the board that the more people that write letters to Valve, the better. In the past, I had considered writing all my letters to Valve as like open letters, so just that people are aware that there's some sort of conversation going on, and sharing my letters to Valve. But I don't know. So, I mean, I wrote them a letter. As I mentioned in the intro to this, you know, I'm going on vacation in Mexico, but otherwise I've been up at my parents' house in Olympia, which is not all that far from Valve headquarters. So, after I was up here for a couple of days, I sent them an email and I said, you know, I lined out, I'll go over it. And somebody actually saying, how can we write letters to Valve? Well, tfteam@valvesoftware.com. Eric S. at valvesoftware.com, and driller@valvesoftware.com are, I would say, the three most important TF people to email at Valve. So my too lazy didn't read at the top was like, yo, I can come by Valve HQ, let's chat. Maybe my in-depth was a little too in-depth. But I basically, you know, I tried to get them up to speed about how, you know, Banny is spreading the gospel. I'm spreading the gospel. You know, people seem to be kind of coming around to some of the philosophies that Valve has espoused to us. And some of these changes are starting to get into place. But I also, you know, talked about kind of the difficulties of the regional LAN organizing. And I basically... I brought up a few other things about Dota and, you know, about how there's very significant changes to the numbers in Dota patches, you know. And I think I tried to be polite and political about it, but, you know, like definitely TF2, it does disappoint me as somebody that's an advocate, you know. I'm extremely optimistic. I'm extremely hopeful. But, you know, I have been disappointed by Valve patches where I'm like expecting a big Valve patch, and then there's like not really adjustments to weapons, you know?
Yeah.
That's something that I really want to see about him. And I kind of urged him a little bit in this email to be like, yo, you guys have to, like, you guys should shake it up. Like, literally grab competitive players from the, you know, from the hands and be like, the sticky launcher sucks now, you know, like just something like that, where it's just like, wake up, like we're going to make this drastic change. You have to make adjustments, you know? And it's tough, but it's also something like that would maybe make people believe more that Valve is going to make adjustments, that Valve's going to make changes. So, you know, I still just believe that we do have to, you know, continue to work on formats that are more open to this stuff. But again, this is like goes back to that kind of conversation about whether the game is alive and what threats actually exist to sixes as a process, as a format, and what the sixes players' elitism is possibly doing to themselves. So I really feel like, and I made this case to Tino, I mentioned it before, but about how you know, this just kind of, these decisions just kind of isolate us further and further away from TF2. And Prolander, you know, has a different whitelist. Prolander is more inclusive to TF2. Highlander, in a lot of ways, is more inclusive to TF2. And I think that Sixes definitely has to have a reality check of like, okay, if we continue down this global whitelist pathway, at what point should we just do that pro mod that we all know is a bad thing? Because something like Prolander might just come in and just might really capture the essence of TF2 and just start getting more players and more players and more players and more sponsors, and all of a sudden Sixes doesn't even matter. So
yeah, and just to add on to that too, part of the global whitelist, like, and a part of why it was created was international competition, and that is just such a poor concept to balance the whitelist around, especially now when it's not really happening anymore, or is at least as much. And even if it did happen, make the teams play on the local rule set. Like, there's nothing wrong with doing that. Like, when they go to I Series, they play on their set, and they come here, they play on our set. And it also is like even more relevant by the fact that NA is now the only league not playing Logjam anymore. And like Logjam is now officially ETF2L and Oz Fortress as a result of the new map showcase and the updates being done to it and the testing recently being done to it. And NA is the only league now not running it, and that map replaced Badlands or Granary in either league. I believe it replaced Badlands in ETF2L, and it replaced Granary in Oz Fortress. Granary was later added back in, though, because they wanted to increase the map pool size, which further negates the global whitelist thing, because, like, yeah, you might make the fucking whitelist the same, but they don't even play the same maps anymore, so who cares?
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be different regardless. Like, so the whole, like, balancing around the whole, like, global unity of sixes is a joke. Like, it is a joke now, like, especially considering the fact that the international play, like, doesn't even really happen anymore. Like, the last I-Series, it was just banned. Banny just went and played with a Euro team, right?
Yeah.
That was the last I-Series?
Yeah.
Like, we didn't even send a team?
Yeah, Rewind 2 is
and that's
international,
fine. And that's fine anyways, like, to be honest, because, like, the harsh reality of the international level TF2 is at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It's more of like an entertainment purpose, and it's more of like Six's legitimization of like global play. You know what I mean?
It's still an important framework. I think that they just have to be careful.
Framework, but I mean, I'm talking about it in perspective of balancing.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Like balancing sixes or like
allowing or balancing TF2 around.
Yeah, like I love the international play. I think it's amazing. Like, I think it's really cool. But using it as an excuse to make a global whitelist is bullshit.
That's true.
So.
So to probably maybe this will be one of our last kind of facets of this conversation. We'll see if anything else comes up about it. Dragon Age 3 Inquisition, great Twitch name, says, why is a pro mod a bad thing? I've never heard a reason. And I guess in fair honesty, I should say that actually is a bit of a subjective term to say that it is a bad thing. It would be more neutral to say that there are some cons to it. There are some serious drawbacks to it. And I think whether it's a good idea or a bad idea definitely matters upon your perspective, and whether you do just really, 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 really want to play like pure sixes, you know. I would say that, you know, really it's like you completely lose developer support, which, you know, obviously some people do sort of make this argument or try to say, oh, well, we don't have developer support. You would have to make a mod anytime that Valve potentially breaks what's in your mod. Everything would shut down because you have to fix the mod. So say you're like, yeah, we like Ubers, you know, we have this pro mod, and then all of a sudden Valve changes the percentages of the build, you know, and then you're like, oh shit, like we have to adjust our mod now, and that could knock out your league for a day. That could knock out your league for a week. You know, in some senses that might be tough to say. You know, maintaining the mod is tough. Workforce for the mod, an amateur mod. You know, if you could, I think obviously if you were to do a pro mod, I think you almost like need to approach it from the base level of potentially eventually spawning it off into an independent game that has its own like Steam launcher, you know, and that obviously is just like a difficult challenge. You know, I think that you've seen things like TF2 Stadium where people are like, oh yeah, this seems like a really good idea. And it's just like the project and the scope of it just drags on and gets larger and larger and more complicated and difficult. And the obstacles of like maintaining it. And I didn't even scratch on what you got into yourself of the serious drawback of makes getting into comp more difficult. Because, yeah, I mean, this might just be a server-side mod. You know, maybe you can just connect to the server, but does that make it harder for servers to be set up? There's just kind of just a lot of things that pile on to that question to just make it more and more obstructive. We're getting another question here that I guess I'd like to briefly touch on. What game mode or modes do you think Valve's competitive should have and why? You know, I feel like I would love to see a little bit of 1v1 in there. I would love to see Ulti Duo be offered. But, you know,
there's so many good game modes for TF2.
Yeah, and in terms of kind of where it is right now in terms of like 5s or 6s or 7s, like I kind of want them to shuffle it up and just experiment with it, because I feel like it wouldn't really take any extra programming for them to be like, okay, now it's 7v7 with class limit 1. You know, like that shouldn't really be too hard for them if they wanted to throw that, you know, Overheal calling me out and coming arena respawn hype. And yeah, I really did like a 5v5 arena respawn. That was something that we sort of teased as being talked about in this episode. We didn't really scratch on it, but again, I think that, you know, that the arena respawn thing, it's like we came from it of this aspect of just like trying to make a really good competitive version of TF2, you know, and something that could hold together all of the appeals and aspects of TF2 and reach out to the pub community, you know. So I think how they have matchmaking right now is honestly like fairly decent, you know. It's just people need to play it, you know, I think there could be some rewards for it. I think that would honestly help out. But you know, we'll see. We'll see. Maybe.
Yeah, and like, it would be really cool that if there was something like that, because it actually might encourage like leagues like ESCA to like actually, you know, create signups for like a fours league or something.
Yeah.
Like, I think it would be so fun to be able to play like a fours match on Sunday and then play like 6v6 through the week, like whatever I'm more serious about and stuff. But it only runs the one format, right? So I don't really see why there wouldn't be a reason to like open up another like division that was for a different format. Like, it doesn't really affect like their infrastructure for sixes and stuff all that much. Like,
maybe I'm just queuing at the wrong time. Super Monkey Apple says Valve Comp is the most played competitive mode in TF2, has the most matches played in a day. Certainly, that's going to be true in terms of in-game stuff. I do wonder if there's more matches through that than there are in pugs. And I think honestly, if that's true, then I think there's hope for the future from that, you know?
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So, we've been rambling for a while. We mentioned that we were gonna get into some dessert, some league covers. I think we're pretty stuffed, but I think we probably could squeeze a little bit of dessert in. So
Ooh, yes.
Yeah.
Ooh, yes.
What were your thoughts on week 2 of ESEA?
Man, so at least an invite, pretty interesting. Like, not how I expected the start of the season to pan out. Like, first of all, I actually thought my team was going to come out a little bit more swinging. Like, we actually had a pretty good games with Meat Market, but then we dropped the ball, and then we had a really hard week this week. We thought we had a pretty decent match against Ascent, but they're just really good, and they rolled us, and we made some small mistakes and lost the game on it.
Mm-hmm.
And like, Meat Market has appeared really strong. Like, they had an intensely strong game against Marmalou and Mason's team.
Yeah.
Which I honestly, like, I didn't know. Like, that was kind of like the game this season where I think it really defined who's where. You know what I mean? Because Velocity's been what I would call underperforming, and they're very good.
Yeah.
That core players usually, and I don't know what's going on with them. They have to kind of figure that out because they're very much underperforming right now. And I think obviously the games with the lower end teams like my team and Terror Squad have gone according to plan, I guess you could say. And I think the big thing that seems to be apparent is, you know, everyone's beatable almost in that like 5-2 range, which is kind of crazy. But I think the matches that have opened up have been really interesting, and Meat Market's a very interesting team, and Mentality is also a really interesting team as well. They did have a good showing against Froyo in the start. Whether I think they have to be like Mentality themselves, if they're going to be like the number 2 team probably, but I think they need to start showing themselves to be a little bit more dominant in the regular season matches.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they were dropping a couple of rounds to Hell's Kitchen, and like they did pretty well against Ascent too. It was an hour-long game though. Like, it depends. It's kind of hard to say at this point, but it seems like kind of how it's panning out. Like, I would honestly put Mentality and Meat Market kind of in the same range right now. Like, it's really impressive how good Meat Market is. And honestly, like, Bro King, as much as I differentiate from him, like, personality-wise, like, I don't like him that much as a person. He's an incredibly good leader, and like, he knows the game very well, and he orchestrates a team beautifully, and it's shown. Like, he gets the talent around him, and that team is extremely good. So it's kind of crazy to see how it's turning out. I did not expect it to go how it's gone in the first 2 weeks. But it's promising. Like, there's the invite's stacked this season, and IM's also pretty stacked. Like, IM's got really good teams.
Yeah,
like, I feel like there's like the top 3 teams in IM are all invite capable teams.
Oh, really? Yeah, I watched the Dunk Masters the other night. I saw now. I'm not sure who's on Theory of Knowledge. Okay, looking at it now.
Theory of Knowledge. They got Fabulous on the team. That team's super good now. They have Stock, who was on my team last season, and Reflecto and Faust, who are like super good soldier duo, like really dynamic and stuff. And Fabulous is like kind of like what Broking is on the Medic class. Like me and Fab are actually really similar players, and so he's just going to orchestrate that team really well. Just give it that level of structure that it needs to succeed. And that's an insane roster too. And Pablo's team is really good. Like Team Now is really good. Like there's a lot of really good IM teams. Like a lot of really good IM teams. So it's cool. Like hopefully these teams like stick together, right? And they actually can start challenging for the lower spots of invite, which we kind of saw this season. Like I don't know if you heard about all this, but there was like almost like it was kind of stupid, but there was like a player vote between like 3 teams for the last spot of invite.
Oh, interesting.
It was Terror Squad, Black Swan, and a team. It's called the Totlings on IM, but they've been mostly known or going by the name Doug One.
Okay.
And there's a vote between them, but eventually the vote like didn't yield anything. And I guess the ESCA upper admins above Try, actually, this is a fact, like above Try, decided they would rather move Terror Squad because they were a previous league team that placed in IM, and the other 2 teams were basically brand new.
Oh, okay.
Even though it's definitely arguable if they were better or not. And I suggested, and like this is the first time this has happened, so I don't really blame Try or ESCA or mostly Try. I suggested that there should have been a 3-team round robin. Like there should have been a play-in tournament.
Yeah.
Because like they were all so equal in skill, there isn't a clear favor. And realistically, that's what should happen. And hopefully, because it happened this season, especially with all the good IM teams now, that'll happen next season. Because like there's still some weird things happening, because if you make the finals IM, you get an automatic spot.
Yeah.
So it's basically if all the other invite teams like die or something and they're contesting over the last spot, there should almost always be a play-in my opinion, if there's enough teams that want the spot. But I just think they weren't expecting it because it never happens, right? Like there's all of a sudden now that everybody gets money for competing in invite, everybody wants to play it. So my team got more money for finishing 6th in invite last season than winning IM, which is how it should be.
Yeah, I mean that's commitment, you know, and I think if you finish out the season, I mean it's important for the stability of the league to really kind of reward those teams. And
I think it was a great change.
Yeah, it's unfortunately that mentality as a sponsor is fading out after the season. I don't know if you heard that news.
I heard about that. It sucks.
Yeah, which is too bad. But definitely, I think that there's a lot of potential for ESCA invite teams to find sponsorship. I certainly, you know, I think that more could be done just from the ESCA side to promote TF2, but you know they certainly are just kind of focused on doing what they're doing.
I've made a couple.
That's fine, right? So
I've made a couple posts about that too, like in terms of sponsorship, because like my team most notably has gotten 2 like pretty good sponsors in the recent memory, which is King's Crew, and another team called Fable Esports, which we went under an invite before. And honestly, like if I had a message to TF2 players, it would be respect your brand way more than you are.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, you know, name themselves really ridiculous things on ESCA, and they name themselves like all memes and shit like that.
Yeah.
And I think that people don't realize that like people are always looking. Like like there's people out there, like people like to think that since the game is small, like no one's watching and there's no chance. Like the sponsors are out there and the representation is out there. If you can show them that you care about a brand and that you are competitive and that you want to stay together as a team and you want to build up, and all of these things like work together to help you get representation, to help you with fees and stuff, and they are out there.
Yeah.
Like I've found multiple sponsors over the years, not because I was an invite player, but because I always got my team to act professionally and play with a brand and respect the brand.
And there's definitely sponsors that are out there that are willing to splash out for like server sponsorship, right? Which is a lot of times what, you know, all that teams really need. And so that's why
like,
they're sort of intimidated, right? But yeah, that's all you need.
I kind of made another point about it before too. It's like once you get that representation, like you should be fucking proud of that shit, and you should be wanting to represent that brand and helping that brand out. And that's what makes those teams want to stick around in TF2 for a long term. Like I'm surprised that Feint is still around due to all the bullshit that has gone on with their teams, but they have Exile at the helm of their team now in IM, which I think is really good. And he's kind of got those guys in line and doing what they should be. And And I go back and I look at teams like when Velocity was sponsored. Like Velocity is not a sponsor anymore. They just retain the name.
Yeah.
And, mentality and stuff. And I look at all those guys and like, they don't even fucking wear their logo.
Yeah.
Which is like crazy to me. And like, I actually talked to Kenzie, who is the owner of Velocity before, because I made a Twitter post about it a while back. And she actually replied to me and she said, "Oh, I don't make them and I don't do anything like that." And like, that's cool and everything, but like, if I'm a player in a game like this, in a situation like this, where the community is how it is now, and you have someone that's giving you money essentially for free, because no one that's sponsoring TF2 is going to ask for prize money back or a percentage of the prize money back. That's not how it is. And you're going to sit there and not use their tags and not use their Twitter tags and not use their avatars and not represent their brand, when literally that's the only thing required of you.
Yeah.
It's like, that's kind of insane to me. Like, that's kind of insane. I've never understood that, and I actually do believe it's a big problem with like why people don't want to get into TF2. I really do.
Yeah.
And like, it's easy to glaze it over because like they're not here already, so like you can't really tell for sure. But I mean, it kind of happened with like Complexity and EG back in the day. Like, their teams just kept dying every single season.
Well,
and they kind of, and like, I know there's a bit more circumstances to that, but like Felon, who's on my team right now, played for EG back in the day.
Yeah.
And he knows Sir Scoots and stuff. And it's a fact, because he told me, because he was on that team, is like, they don't want to represent groups of people that can't stick it out.
Yeah.
Can't improve together and shit. Like, that's a huge thing for sponsors, right?
And the EG one was simple because on one hand there was some ESEA related shenanigans kind of with it. On the other hand, the base level of it, Slardar basically couldn't do his homework ahead of time.
Slardar.
That's like what it boiled down to, right? Like, oh well, I don't know, I have like school, and it's like, well, haven't you like done your essays like already? And it's like, I don't know. And it's like, have you talked to your professors? Like, oh, I don't know. I'm like, are you fucking serious? You know?
I remember this.
Like,
and another situation that happened that's similar to that is Destro. Like, when Felon was on the team back then, it was like Destro, Yogg, Casey,
Destro's my boy.
That team, Destro didn't get on the fucking plane. He fucking was at the airport and he freaked out and he just didn't get on the plane.
Yeah.
You remember that? And then they actually had Shade fill in.
Yeah, Destro felt bad about that. I talked about Destro later.
Shade filled in for Pandemic Atlanta.
When that was Kermit.
And they had, Kermit didn't go, but then Davis rang for EG when Destro didn't come.
Oh yeah, I sort of forgot about that.
Yeah, so like, I'm kind of remembering it now.
Yeah.
And like, and shit like that happens, and then they see all the players that dodge land. Like, another one, for example, is a really prolific invite player that dodged land all the time. We had it, Ducky.
Yeah.
Ducky was an insane player online, and there was a lot of speculation if he was cheating or not, because he would drop the most insane stats you ever seen and then never show up to land.
Yeah, I actually did.
Crazy.
Yeah, actually one time way back in the day, I spent a little bit of time looking at a Ducky clip, and I was pretty sure I found him wall hacking, and then I was pretty sure I found it, and then I realized that one of his teammates had vision of the scout. And so the teammate probably calmed out the scout, and then he piped him coming around the corner.
Was it the one in the frag video where he's walking out of Granary Garage into middle and he throws the pipe? Okay, because there's one in Muscle Milk and Bouillon's frag video that's like that, and I'm like, pretty sure you're wall.
No, yeah, this one was sort of weird, but it was just like, he turns around on Badlands mid and throws a pipe to closet, and this like scout runs out and like just eats the pipe, and it's just kind of like, what the fuck, you know? But his teammate gets the slimmest glimmer of him, and it's hard to make wall hack accusations. So,
but it's like, going back to the original point, is like, they see that kind of stuff happen around lands and groups of players that break up every season after they don't win, and they go, what's the point, really? Like, I know there was other circumstances regarding EG in particular, but like, and I can't really speak on Complexity that much because I didn't know like any of the players like personally that were in it at the time, and like, I don't really know what happened there. I don't know Jason Lake. I've never talked to him.
Yeah.
So I can't, but I would assume it's a similar thing because they kind of pulled out the exact same time that EG pulled out. Like,
yeah. Well, I know one facet of it, and the other facet, which I I don't know, that other facet of it is almost better tied into like wrap into the arena respawn. You know, it's like the story of a arena respawn, aka how eXtine doesn't trust anybody anymore. You know, like, or we can like throw in a couple other stories, you know, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Another
time. So, yeah, speaking of as well, you know, we've had our appetizer, we had our main course, we had our dessert, and now here we are daydreaming about the next meal. We've already been like kicking around hella, you know, concepts. Definitely that idea of, you know, how to attract sponsors, how to deal with sponsors. That's something that I want to talk about. Before this episode, we were kicking around other kind of punny episode names. And, yeah, that one matches. Got to spend money to make money, right? Because I think there is money to be made in TF2, but teams like you do have to put some investments in, right? So. All right, Lucrative, any final words from you, my friend?
Nothing besides, if you guys like the podcast, please like go and post on the thread and share it and stuff like that. We're going to be doing some more cool stuff, hopefully with some guests soon. Tales of the past.
Yeah.
There's another idea that's starting around. Tales from the past. Yeah, I'm excited about that. So, no, apart from that, just another fun day, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, awesome, ladies and gentlemen. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We will be having more episodes. I'm going on vacation coming up, so next week we won't be having anything. After that, hopefully, I don't really know what the future holds. So hopefully after that, we'll be able to get a new episode in the books pretty soon. Maybe we'll have to do something a little bit crazier with like local recordings or non-streaming. But hopefully we can just get that squared away. Stay tuned for more episodes. We're definitely determined to make it past 6 episodes and be a real podcast, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we'll be having a lot more fun talking TF2. Thanks to everybody as well who chimed in on the comments and the live chat. Really appreciate your guys' contribution to the discussion. And on behalf of Lucrative, thanks so much for watching. I am eXtine, and well, we will see you guys next time. Peace out!
See ya.